morning. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Advance. I'm Brandon Waltons here with Michael Quinn Sullivan in front of the Capitol, where, believe it or not, in just a couple weeks' time, the legislative session, at least the regular session, is going to be over.
As they say, no man's life, liberty, or property is safe when the legislature's in session, which means it's always nice when they leave.
Yes.
A lot of things still undone. Some things have been done. Some things that honestly I didn't think would get done. They've gotten done. A lot of things, though, undone. But this week, next week, there are opportunities to get some of those things done, aren't there?
Absolutely. So we're now past the deadline. We talked about this last week. Last Thursday night was the deadline for the House to pass House bills. But that doesn't mean that the session is over. In fact, now the game is the Senate bills, right? So the Senate, of course, was passing bills pretty early on in the session. You remember that in February and March, while the House wasn't. Now you've got all those bills over in the House. These next couple of weeks are the time when the House can finally pass out some of those priorities. And so some of those are on the calendar this week already. We've got a calendar for today and tomorrow. Expect that we'll have Thursday and Friday out either later today or tomorrow. And we're already getting to some of those priorities. So there's really interesting to see, though, that even though there's such a small amount of time left in the session, there's still a lot that could be done or that couldn't be.
One of those most notable things I hear folks, see folks on X. I get emails from folks. I see posts on Facebook. People very upset by the lack of progress on property tax relief. We have the fourth highest property tax burden in the nation. People expect with a $24 billion surplus that there would be movement on property tax relief. And so I guess today there is going to be now finally debate on some property tax relief.
Yeah, so the version being debated in the House today is essentially what we saw come out of the Senate earlier this year. Now, granted, I think that was back in February that the Senate passed it.
Right.
But this is a package that would raise the homestead exemption from $100,000 to $140,000 for most people. If you're 65 or older, that would be raised up to $200,000. And that's being paired with a business property tax exemption that I believe is $125,000. So this is the package as it is right now. And altogether, you look at the cost of this, this is a $6 to $7 billion property tax relief budget, which, look, I'd be happy. I'll say yes to $1 of property tax relief. It means we can keep coming back, right? But it is interesting because back early on in the session when Governor Greg Abbott laid out his emergency items for the legislature, he called for $10 billion in new property tax relief, this falling a little bit short of that. Now, some people, these numbers, right? Some people will do the numbers in a way they say, well, no, technically it's $10 billion because we're counting some of the money that we committed before. Groups like Texas for Fiscal Responsibility have analyzed this, said this is about $6 to $7 billion. And so still means most of the surplus not being used towards property tax relief. But that's not to say that lawmakers don't have an opportunity potentially today, and we could see this happen on the House floor, perhaps some amendments to try to increase that even further.
Yeah, and I think that's where a number of folks are saying that they want more done. Again, when you have a $24 billion $24 billion surplus, there's clearly room for them to do more tax relief. Wow, there's a lot of noise here around the Capitol. I hope you're not hearing it. We're hearing it. But there's $24 billion in surplus. The legislature is spending a big chunk of it on various things.
Yes.
And I think a lot of Texans are saying, hey, we want this spent on Texans in terms of property tax relief. So let's move on to property tax relief. Also in the Texas House, you've got now movement on what has become Dan Patrick's, in some ways, his kind of big white whale for this legislative session, and that is taking on the smoke shops selling THC-laced products.
Yeah, smoke shops or even gas stations where we see you have these THC products that are being sold in part as a consequence of the state's laws that were put into place recently in some of the recent sessions dealing with hemp, okay? So hemp, that was being sold as, we're going to make fabric and rope and stuff out of it, right? Well, of course, some enterprising individuals took advantage of that, and now you have on just about any corner, doesn't matter where you are, all these THC, CBD shops, and then, of course, even in convenience stores. A lot of them, as Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has noted, are being put up by schools. A lot of them are targeting or advertising towards children. And so one of the top priorities of the Senate Bill 3 that passed out of the Senate earlier this year, would ban these THC products. Essentially, the state has a compassionate use program, but you have to go through a doctor if you maybe really require these products. But essentially, they're saying we don't think you should just be able to walk into 7-Eleven and buy them. That bill made it over to the House. The House version, of course, they've changed it, right. And essentially, it's gone from being a ban on THC to a new regulatory infrastructure. And what we see is that already you have Representative Tom Oliverson has filed an amendment. He's going to attempt to amend the bill back to a ban on THC like passed out of the Senate. And this is something that not only has the support, I think you had 50 some odd co-authors on that amendment, which means that it's certainly gaining support before they vote on it today. But even last night, you had Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick putting out a video where he expressed support for this, said, look, the Senate needs to, or the House rather, needs to ban THC. He even went as far as to say he wasn't going to leave. He wasn't going to leave Austin until they did it.
And look, the Lieutenant Governor has the ability to make good on that promise, holding on to the budget the way the Senate has, holding on to other key priorities. The Lieutenant Governor can actually force the legislature to stay in session. Beyond, it's unlikely. It's unlikely. But that is a possibility that the Lieutenant Governor has. Now, we've been talking about things coming up on the House calendar this week. There is over in the Texas Senate a big priority item for a lot of folks dealing with in-state tuition for illegal aliens. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's been on the intent calendar for a couple days, meaning they could get to it. The Senate calendar works a little bit differently. They put the bills they could get to, but they don't get to all of them on any given day. So you're sometimes left a little bit surprised. One of those bills is legislation by Senator Mays Middleton to end in-state tuition for illegal aliens. This is something we do in Texas, have done for quite a while now. Where
since
if you're
2001, Rick Perry signed that into law. 2001.
If you're someone from Montana or something, you want to come to the University of Texas, you have to pay full pop, right? Full tuition. But if you're an illegal alien who snuck across from Mexico, right? Well, all of a sudden you get a discount. And it's not just a discount. It's not like the schools are offering this out of the goodness of their heart. This is a taxpayer subsidized discount. So we're subsidizing in-state tuition for illegal aliens. That's something that conservatives have been pushing for a long time. We haven't really seen any traction out of the legislature in recent years. This is probably the furthest we've seen a potential ban go. And the fact that is on the intent calendar, there is still time. Look, we're obviously less than 2 weeks away. They're going to have to move fast. But if they're able to pass that out of the Senate today, tomorrow, in these next few days and get it over to the House does technically have enough time if they hurry to get that through. And I think that would be a big win, especially on a session where, when we talk about mixed results, I think border security, issues dealing with immigration is probably one of the priorities where we've seen some of the least movement on this session.
Right. And, and I think that's where a lot of us are going to have to kind of reset our thinking from the Bonnen and the Phelan legislative sessions, which were just kind of in many ways dumpster fires for conservatives. And in some ways, this Burrows speakership, that this legislative session seems to be kind of returning to the good, bad old days. I don't know how you said, of kind of a grab bag of, you get some wins here, not enough wins there. None of which is to excuse the lack of wins, but to note that I think that maybe we as conservatives and certainly activists and voters, we need to start having some real careful conversations about our expectations. You go to California, where they have, in many ways, the same kind of partisan ownership of their state government, but flipped, right? They get all their stuff done. Their activists aren't left at the end of a legislative session wanting more. Whereas in Texas, they kind of aim of dangling things in front of us. And then a lot of that's a hiring problem. That's a hiring problem on our part as the voters. We need to make sure that we're doing a better job of the kind of questions we ask and the expectations that we have for holding those folks accountable.
Yes, absolutely.
So, all right. Hey, guys, thanks for joining us on this edition of the Advance. The House is about to gavel in. You can, TexasScorecard.com. You can find the link to that as well as the Senate when they gavel in. Look forward to